So good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you all are joining us from, and maybe there's some good evenings out there as well. I'm Doris Mold, and I am one of the two co-CEOs of Annie's Project, and today we are having our second Annie's Project Showcase, and today we'll be talking about managing for a margin squeeze. And we're featuring Colorado Annie's, and we're excited to get to that topic here soon. I'm just going to let Carisha Devlin, who is my co-CEO, say hello. Carisha, if you'd just like to say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I think it's going to be a great showcase and look forward to hearing from Brent and Jenny.
All right, so we started this idea of having the showcase because it is Annie's Project 20th anniversary, and we're real proud of that fact that we're celebrating 20 years, and we do have a number of other activities that are taking place throughout the year, some great learning opportunities and celebration opportunities as well. And you can find out more information on our anniesproject.org website, and we also have these things posted on our social as well. We also want to thank Farm Credit for helping to support 20th anniversary activities, including this webinar series. Also just want to give a couple moments here just to talk about Annie's Project in general. Ruth Hambleton is Annie's Project founder, and she founded this project based off of her experience working as an extension educator for many years, but also her experience growing up. Her mother is the original Annie's, and Annie's Project is dedicated to her and based on many of her life experiences as a woman that married a farmer and then ended up becoming the farmer herself as her husband went to work an off-farm job. And Ruth's early experiences, seeing the challenges and opportunities that her mother faced, helped plant that seed, and it germinated when she became an extension educator and decided to start the Annie's Project program. Just a note here, this is the full list of our showcases to date. Obviously, we have already done March 24th, and that recording will be available to you if you're interested in learning more about cybersecurity and managing financial risk. Today, we're talking about margin squeeze. Next month, we're talking about farm succession. And then we have to be announced our programs with Indiana Annie's. October 6th, we have an ag law program, and West Virginia is going to be featured in November. So we have some great sessions coming up. We are purposefully skipping the summer months because those seem to be the busiest for all of us. And so, but you can always go back and watch any kind of recording that we might have. And then also wanted to make people aware before we get started that we do have a program that Annie's is one of 4 pilot locations on and pilot organizations on learning how to become a crop insurance agent or loss adjuster. We are actually being part of a training program that will help train people, farmers in particular, people that are in production agriculture. We're looking for you. And if you have an interest, especially if you're from an underserved audience, which does include women and veterans, we want to let you know that there's some opportunities to get educated and get involved in this project. We did have a meeting last week, and there is a recording of that meeting up on the website with more information if you're interested. And one last thing, we have a save the date, October 18th through 20th. We will be meeting in St. Louis and have some great sessions planned there. So with that, I am going to stop the share and let Jenny and Brent introduce themselves and take over the showcase for today. So welcome, Jenny and Brent. We're pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you, Doris. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And Brent, can you confirm with the thumbs up that we're seeing the slideshow view? Thank you very much. So good morning or good afternoon, whichever time zone you all are joining us from. We're so thrilled to be here today talking about Colorado Annie's Project and celebrating 20 years with you guys. Annie's Project came to Colorado in 2017, so we've had the pleasure of celebrating 7 of those years with the program. So I'd like to introduce myself and my colleague joining me today as a speaker. My name is Jenny Beiermann. I currently serve as the state coordinator of Annie's Project, and I'm also an agriculture and business management specialist with Colorado State University Extension. I'm located in Grand Junction, Colorado on the western side of the state. So I primarily serve the western slope of Colorado, but I also have some statewide responsibilities as well. I usually speak on at least one topic for each of the Annie's projects that we host here in the state. And being state coordinator is definitely one of my favorite roles in my job. My colleague today, Dr. Brent Young, served as a state coordinator from 2017 to 2020 when he transferred that role to me. He's also an agriculture and business management specialist with CSU Extension. Brent is located in Sterling, Colorado on the eastern side of the state, and he also has statewide responsibilities as well, and we work collaboratively very often. Brent serves in an advisory capacity for Annie's Project, and he also generally speaks on topics for each of our programs that we host around the state. Brent and I also both come from farming and ranching backgrounds. I'm originally from Southwest Wyoming, where I helped operate my family's, my father had a veterinary practice as well as our large-scale cow-calf operation. My brother and I are the sixth generation to work on our family's ranch. And Brent currently owns and operates a farm in Sterling, Colorado with his wife, his son and his daughter-in-law, and also his grandkids. So Colorado first was offered, Annie's Project in Colorado was first offered by Brent in 2017 at Northeastern Junior College in Sterling, Colorado. And we had 17 graduates from the program. Among these graduates are actually Brent's wife and his daughter-in-law featured here in the picture. And Brent, if you don't mind me asking, would you be willing to share your testimonial of your farm operations after your family members completed Annie's Project?
Yeah, Jenny, I'm pretty proud of that. The photo that you see there, the back row person on the far left would be my wife, Carla. And then the front row, the lady that would be second from the left is my daughter-in-law, Andrea. And what I tell folks is that prior to Annie's Project, most of our farm decisions were made via text messaging between my son and I. After Annie's, we still do a lot of our conversations, our communications via text, but now my wife and daughter-in-law are included in those text messages, and we make much better decisions as a farm because of Annie's and the involvement with my wife and daughter-in-law.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Brent. So fast forward then 7 years, we've come a long way since then, and we just offered our most recent program. It concluded in February, where we had 18 graduates in Monte Vista, Colorado, which is located in the San Luis Valley, which is a prime agricultural valley in south central Colorado. So a look at the program data over the past 7 years and our graduate numbers. We started out very strong, thanks to Brent. But of course, COVID caused a pretty drastic decline in our programs in 2021. We've been working really hard to rebuild this, and 2023 is off to a great start. We already have 25 graduates and more programs planned for this fall and next spring. And this year, Colorado Annie's hit a wonderful milestone as well. We have now served over 400 graduates of Annie's Project in Colorado, 416 to be exact. So we're so excited to have reached this milestone, and we're really looking forward to crushing many more as we continue to offer programs throughout the state of Colorado. If you'd like to learn more about Annie's Project in Colorado specifically, or look for upcoming programs in our state, we have a dedicated webpage for Colorado Annie's Project that you can access here at this URL. So moving into our main presentation, as a sample of education that participants would experience in an Annie's Project class in Colorado, Brent and I have chosen to present on surviving the 2023 margin squeeze. So in addition to leading Annie's Project in Colorado, as I mentioned earlier, Brent and I are also ag economists with CSU Extension. We work collaboratively with one other field economist as part of the agriculture and business management team. And we've been speaking on this topic pretty regularly since last fall to help prepare the farmers and ranchers for the upcoming production season. So this was a perfect fit for a sample of risk management education that we provide. So a margin squeeze happens when input prices or cost of production increases, or when the price of commodities decreases or drops, or when we have a combination of both that results in very thin profit margins for our agricultural producers. And unfortunately, 2023 is shaping up to be one of those years where we have a combination of increased input costs as well as decreased prices. So in this presentation, we're going to discuss some of the current input costs and commodity prices. And then we're going to move into strategies for managing for the margin squeeze. And we're also going to demonstrate a decision tool that we have developed estimating enterprise profitability and input control. So as Brent is our most punny team member and our registered jokester, I'll let Brent start us off with discussing a question that keeps him awake at night.
Thanks, Jenny. If you were to ask this question of my wife, she would say nothing keeps him up at night. He keeps me up at night. But a question that I've posed starting back in October with some of the meetings we've had with agricultural lenders, and that question is, will $6 corn and $8 wheat, which are high prices, as most of you would understand, cash flow 1,200 ton anhydrous, $6 diesel, and 8% operating interest. Now, many of you that kept up with these prices know that both corn and wheat prices have come down, and thankfully fertilizer, diesel have also come down somewhat. Operating interest, on the other hand, has actually gone up. Next slide, please, Jenny. One click only. So certainly when we talk about desperate times, you can all relate to the old saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. And so Carisha, in order to help our family out, our family farm, and to maybe reduce the cost of one of our very needed inputs in production agriculture these days, I have placed an ad in every small newspaper in Colorado in hopes that I could help our local family operation out. One more click, Jenny. And so I've not had any replies yet to this ad. I placed it everywhere. I'm a little curious why no one's responded. I have checked with our farm CPA, and she assures me that the extra large go-go boots and the matching shiny shorts and cap are tax deductible. So hopefully we'll be able to help out, and I can generate a little low-cost diesel for the family operation.
Thank you, Brent, for always starting us out with some lighthearted humor. Brent's pretty fun to take along to presentations, and he usually starts out with a joke. I've come to anticipate them and enjoy them, Brent. So I'm going to take the first part of the presentation and setting the background with some data regarding input prices and commodity prices. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brent to talk about the strategies for managing the squeeze and discuss our new decision tool that we've made. So this is a look at the Illinois Production Cost Report. This comes out every month. So you can use this report to track some input costs. So here we have fertilizer and diesel prices. And what's nice about this chart is it shows a price range, it shows the average price, and then it also shows the change as well. So as you can see from this, prices for these inputs are up a little bit. Looking at another graph for input costs, and this is showing us cost for fertilizer. So the first 5 lines, we have anhydrous, urea, nitrogen, DAP, and potash. These are all sold in dollars per ton. So we use the left-hand scale for prices of these inputs. And then diesel, of course, is sold in dollars per gallon. That's on the right-hand scale for the green dotted line. So as you can see, prices increased drastically post-COVID. Definitely, this is a combination of worldwide inflation as well as the war in Ukraine. Prices are starting to moderate, as we can see for these inputs. Data is showing that diesel demand was lower in the first 10 weeks of this year, down about 12.6% from 2022. But still, if you look back to pre-COVID prices in 2020, they're still higher for most of these inputs in most cases. Here we have a look at the percentage change of fertilizer prices from 2018 to 2023. These graphs can be a little bit deceiving because they show the percentage change from prior years. So because 2023, the gray line with the yellow dots, is below 2022, which is in red, it doesn't mean that the price has decreased. What's happening is the rate of increase is decreased. So the price is still up. Shows us here that fertilizer prices definitely increased from 2018 to the current time. We also have the percentage change in chemicals from 2018 to 2023. So similar to our fertilizer prices, they had a very high increase in 2022. Hurricane Ida caused some problems for major chemical manufacturing in the United States when it shut down some big plants. This is also caused by closures and reduced production due to COVID of plants in India and China. They're also major producers of Roundup. So major cause of these price hikes for agricultural chemicals is due to shortened supply. Natural gas price increase is most attributable to the war in Ukraine, as Russia is a big producer of natural gas. And natural gas is important because it's a major component in the production of nitrogen fertilizer. So we're seeing these prices are moderating some. Natural gas futures for March fell below $2 per million this week for the first time since 2020, after they hit record highs of $8.37 in June of 2022. However, they still are quite a bit above our pre-COVID rates, as we see here. Looking at commercial electric power and the percentage change here, this is even up compared to this time in 2022 and exponentially higher than in 2018 to 2020. Commercial electric power is generated by natural gas, which has caused this spike, as well as we've had a lot of conversions of coal-powered plants to natural gas plants. Farm machinery parts have experienced a lot of increase and decrease since 2021. Prices are starting to normalize, but this does definitely prove that the most valuable person on the farm is the one who doesn't break your equipment. So, as I'm sure we've all experienced, machinery parts have been expensive and they've also been very hard to find. But again, we're hoping that prices will moderate some coming into 2023 and that supply will be a little bit more steady as well. Here we have all our commodity prices and the percentage changes. This represents any commodities, anything from corn to cattle. So this graph can also be a little bit deceiving. Fortunately for our beef producers, the price has remained pretty strong, and that is a major factor driving the increases that we see here. However, coming into 2023, we can see that that trend is starting to decrease quite a bit. And in all reality, especially for our grain commodities, moving into the current month of April, there's been a large decrease in commodity prices, most below the 0% mark on this graph. And I do have a few graphs to support that as well. This gives us a snapshot of the weekly natural gas contract from 2018 to 2023. Again, this shows a relationship between natural gas and how it drives the price of fertilizer as well as the price of electricity. The good news is that it is moderating, but again, we see the all-time highs that we hit in 2022 because of the war in Ukraine. Also taking a look at our weekly crude oil contract, which this definitely affects the price of diesel. So you can see here in April of 2020, there was a massive dip. And this is when oil hit negative $40 per barrel, which means that companies were willing to pay you $40 to haul it off. I guess Brent and I should have looked into that a little bit more. We are getting a little bit closer to pre-COVID rates, but you can see here that the war in Ukraine caused some major spikes, as Russia is responsible for about a third of the world's oil population. And lastly, looking at a couple of our major commodity prices for grains, here we have wheat for the July 23 current contract. And this shows us that prices have, as we said, really softened for our grain commodities. Especially when we look at corn, here we have the December 23 contract. Prices have softened very heavily for our grain commodities. So these slides are not meant to be depressing, although they kind of are. I apologize for that. But what we want to do is more paint a picture of exactly what the margin squeeze looks like for our producers here in Colorado, and why it's important for producers to have good risk management skills to weather these tough times that we experience in agriculture and survive these downturns. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Brent to discuss some strategies for managing the margin squeeze and demonstrating our new decision tool.
Jenny, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you go ahead and, well, you've quit. Okay, great. I'll take over the share. Just give me just a second. I'll do a screen share here. And Jenny, if you can confirm that we're seeing that last slide that you showed.
We are. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. So again, to start off, as Jenny mentioned, what are some things you can do as a producer to help manage the margin squeeze? Well, first of all, we recommend that you look at developing enterprise budgets. And it's really important that those budgets include both fixed and variable costs. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail later in the program. But basically what we see, our producers are fairly good at being able to determine variable costs. If I ask a producer, how much does it cost you to produce a bushel of corn? In many cases, they can tell me to the cent in terms of the variable costs. The fixed costs can be more difficult to calculate, and we'll talk about how to do that. And actually, the tool we've produced will help producers allocate those fixed costs to their enterprises. Those enterprises that are very accurate can help us determine a cost of production. That cost of production is extremely important in developing and executing a marketing plan. So it's essential when we have a margin squeeze that we're able to produce very, very accurate enterprise budgets. Secondly, we need to look at controlling input prices. Looking at the slides that Jenny provided for you, there's no doubt that input prices are higher, record highs. We all know that as we look to purchase those. So what are the opportunities to lock in lower prices? Is it possible that we can purchase or at least be able to access input early on, maybe a year in advance, or at least in the fall for spring use? And then the other thing we might consider, especially in these days with high fertilizer prices, is it possible that we may reduce the fertilizer use in a particular enterprise to produce a more economically efficient yield? It may not be the maximum yield that that particular field could produce, but it's a yield that requires fewer fertilizer inputs and actually will produce a higher return. And again, the tool that we're going to demonstrate in a minute will allow producers to do that. And then finally, cash flow management is just essential. As we see interest rates for operating loans increase, it's important that we're able to make changes as we can in our cash flow regarding when we might sell a commodity or when we're going to purchase an input to reduce the amount of money we have to borrow. We've all been spoiled the last several years with historically low interest rates, historically low interest rates on operating loans. Those times are over, at least for the near future. And so when we see operating loans creeping up to that 8.5, 9% level, cash flow management is extremely important. It also can be a way to manage our outflows as well and do some cost control. But again, it takes time and effort to put together these accurate cash flow projections, and having a tool to do that would certainly be helpful. So in order to assist producers in that effort of managing this margin squeeze that we find ourselves into, Jenny, myself, and colleague Jeff Turnell have developed what we call the Enterprise Profitability and Input Control Excel decision tool. We tend to refer to this by its acronym EPIC. And as with most of the decision tools we have, it follows a very common look. And so this particular tool will allow a producer to allocate overheads to various enterprises. You have the opportunity to track up to 5 crop enterprises and 1 cow-calf enterprise. Also, we provide a page for you to do some detailed analysis of chemical use on those 5 crop enterprises. You're actually able to put in the chemicals used, the cost of those chemicals, the rate per acre for up to 4 applications for each one of the potential crops. And so again, we feel this is a tool that will really help producers manage that margin squeeze. So typically one of the first questions producers have when we introduce this tool is, wow, that sounds great. Where can I get a copy of it? So I want to very quickly lead you through that process. Jenny alluded to before, we have a very extensive website with all kinds of great materials, including probably 50 or so decision tools. So I provided for you the URL for that. Our website, I would encourage you to find the website, bookmark it. I think it's going to be one you're going to return to multiple times because I think you're going to find some really great information there. So if you go to the home page, first thing you'll need to do is click down on the box at the bottom right-hand corner that says Decision Tools. Once you click on that box, this screen to the left will populate. You'll see this photo that's depicted in this slide. Then you have to click one more time in the green box that says click here. And then that's going to take you to a list of all of the wonderful decision tools that we have developed over time. If you'll scroll down in the list, in the bottom part of that list, you come across those tools that are specifically designed for risk management. And we actually have two versions of Epic, depending on the year or which version you would have of Excel. So the very early versions of Excel, you'd want to use the first Epic tool. If you have an Excel tool that is from 1997 to 2003 and beyond, then you want to use the next one. In addition, and what I'm going to spend some time sharing with you today, we've actually put together a sample set of entries. So if you really want to see how the tool can use and be used and what it looks like with numbers and data inputted, you can go to this composite farm and see a real good sample of data put into the decision aid. So the way this works, and again, it's the same system for all of our decision aids, where you see a green box with blue lettering, that's where you put some kind of data entry. Typically, these are going to be cells that you would put some kind of wording or alphabet characters in. Then we have yellow cells, again, with the blue numbers. That would be cells that would be populated with either numbers in the form of dollar amounts, percentages. And then finally, either the green or pale yellow cells, if they have a little blue a red triangle in the upper right corner, you can click on that and it'll give you a description of what kind of information we are asking you to put in that particular cell. So pretty straightforward, relatively easy to use. So I alluded to earlier, one of the challenges that all producers have is being able to not only determine variable costs, but also fixed costs. And so we all know variable costs are those that are directly related to our level of production. And so those change with units of production. Again, if we go from producing 100 acres of corn to 1,000 acres of corn, we're going to see an increase in those variable costs. Examples of variable costs could be feed, it could be seed, it could be fertilizer, it could be diesel fuel. Fixed costs, on the other hand, sometimes called overhead or indirect costs, are not related to the cost of production. We pay these regardless if we're producing 1,000 acres of corn or no corn. And so those tend to be costs such as non-crop related insurance. It could be a mortgage payment on land. It might be equipment payments, real estate taxes. So those things, again, that we're going to pay for regardless of our level of production. And as I mentioned earlier, most farmers and ranchers can tell you within just a few cents of what their variable cost of production is, cost per pound for producing that weaned calf, cost per bushel for corn or wheat. But when we ask them to include the fixed costs, that's when things become a little difficult. And one of the challenges we would have as a producer is, let's use that example of that mortgage for the land. So we've got that payment. We realize it's a fixed cost. We realize that it should be included with variable costs to get a true cost of production. But how do we determine how much of that land costs should be allocated to the corn enterprise, the wheat enterprise, the cow-calf enterprise? So that process of allocating those fixed costs equitably to the various enterprises we produce can become very difficult. And so in order to address that, we've actually built that into the EPIC program. So one of the first things a producer would do in using this program would be to designate what crop enterprises would be used or are produced. And then also we do have the one livestock enterprise, cow-calf. And so what the program would ask you to do is designate a percentage of your overhead charges that are to be allocated to each one of those enterprises. Notice we have a check system here. And so if these numbers don't add up to 100 or they are greater than 100, this number will change to reflect that. So that's a check to make sure that you've actually allocated 100% of your overhead costs to one of your, at least to one of your enterprises. So again, this becomes an issue, a question with producers. How exactly do I do that? So what I would like to do very briefly today is talk about three methods that you could use to allocate those overheads. They range in order from complexity and accuracy. So the acreage production method is the least complex, least accurate. The actual variable expense method is the most complex, but tends to be the most accurate. So the way you might use these, if we look at the acreage production unit method, typically the rules are for every irrigated acre, that is one production unit. Every non-irrigated acre is a half production unit, and every producing mother cow is 1 unit. And so this is pretty simple. It's just a matter of inventorying how many irrigated, non-irrigated, and cows you have. And so the sample operation that we have with that NOCO or NICO sample on our website. This is a farm that's got 560 acres of non-irrigated winter wheat. So they get a half a unit or a total of 230. 500 acres of irrigated corn would be 500 units. 140 acres of irrigated alfalfa would be 140. 140 acres of non-irrigated proso millet, again, half a unit per acre, 70 units. 88 acres of non-irrigated sunflowers for 44 units. And then 200 mother cows, again, they get a unit each. So this operation would have a total of 1,184 units. So what we're looking for is a percentage. And so if we take the number of units per enterprise and divide it by the total, we would come up with then a percentage. And so doing that, this is what that acreage production unit method would look like in terms of how those overheads would be allocated per enterprise. So you can see those numbers there in terms of what percentage of the overheads are allocated to each enterprise. A second method, which is a little bit more difficult, a little bit more accurate, would be production gross revenue. So in this particular method, we would take the production units in either acres or head and multiply that by our expected yield and our expected price. So again, using our example, we have 560 acres of wheat. We anticipate a yield of 45 bushels per acre and a price at $9.05 a bushel. So a total of $228,060 in revenue. So you can follow that down and find that we project a total revenue for this operation of $1,222,014. And again, dividing those individual gross revenues by the total gross revenues would equal a percentage to be allocated to of the overheads. And so you can see a slight difference then in those allocation percentages. One of the issues with using this method obviously is the two factors that we really don't know at the beginning of a season. Although we can get close in terms of estimates, would be yields and prices. So there are some issues using this method. The final method is it's a variable expense method, and this is to calculate the planned production units times the actual variable expenses per production unit. Obviously, this method requires that you've got really good production records. You've got to be able to go back in those production records and split out variable versus overhead costs for each one of your enterprises. You may want to use a 3-year average of these, or where we see a year like we've had the last few years where those input prices have gone up so drastically, you may simply want to use what were those variable costs from the previous production year. Again, we take that variable cost per acre times the number of acres to get the variable cost per enterprise, add those up for the total variable cost of the farm, and then divide accordingly to get a percentage. And so the percentages then using this method would look something like this. And then this final slide is just a composite that takes a look at all of the methods. And although there aren't drastic changes between each one of the methods, there are differences. And so one of the things we might recommend to a producer, if you're new to this, and maybe all you can do initially is come up with an acreage unit, at least use that method. And then maybe as your record keeping becomes more sophisticated over time, you can get to the point where you can actually determine variable expenses and use the variable expense method of allocating those particular costs to an enterprise. I want to stop at this point, Doris and Carisha, and maybe give those that are joining us an opportunity to ask questions if they have those at this particular point.
Everyone, if you'd like to put something in the chat, certainly feel free to do that, or there's also a Q&A tab as well, but we'd love to hear from you. I know that we had several questions before we in the registration, but we'd love to hear any live questions you might have as well. And I know, Brent, that it always takes longer for people to type things in than what we think.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Doris, if you happen to see questions in the chat, please stop me and we can address those. Before Certainly. I move on, I've mentioned this Northeast Colorado composite farm. This is actually a composite of several counties here in northeastern Colorado. I'm actually in Logan County. We farm in Logan County, but I've taken data from the 2017 Census of Agriculture. And basically what I've said is if we took those counties and combined those and used averages, what would the average farm look like? So from those counties, the average farm would be approximately 1,428 acres. And you can see the crop mix and the acres that would be assigned to each one of those crops. So as you can see, winter wheats are #1 crop, corn is 2, alfalfa, proso, millet, and the average cow-calf herd in this area, which is again part of usually a crop farm, would be about 200 pair. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen and then move to the actual tool. And Jenny, if you'll help me at this part of the program to make sure as I go through the tool, if I need to enlarge the screen to make it more easier to view, please let me know and I'll do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have the tool displayed. Is that what everyone's seeing, Jenny?
We are.
Okay, great.
Just zoom in just a little bit.
Okay.
It's quite small.
So again, this is the page you've seen before. This is the welcome page. The next would be the basic information. We have obviously put this together for Colorado, and so the drop-down menus that we have reflect regions of the state. Obviously, you would need to do that. Gives you an opportunity to assign a farm name and a year for analysis. And again, then the first thing you'd want to do using one of the methods we described earlier would then be to allocate your overhead expenses to the various enterprises that make up your particular farm and ranch. And even though you could put in as many as 5 crops, obviously you wouldn't have to do that. If you only have 1 or 2 crop enterprises, just put 1 or 2. Maybe you don't have a cow-calf enterprise. Again, you wouldn't need to include that. You just need to allocate the overheads by the number of enterprises you have, ensuring that number would total 100. We are working on some additional livestock enterprises and hope to have a cattle feeding enterprise and hopefully a sheep enterprise developed during the summer. From there, you go to the overhead page. This is where you start to
Brent, we lost your audio there for a minute and we lost your screen share.
Okay, yeah, we just had a loss of power here. So let me see if I can get this pulled up again.
Risk management demonstrated at its finest, folks. Here.
So I, for some reason, only have one screen. So what we're going to attempt to do is get back to screen share. And I'm hopeful that I enlarge that you're back to the screen share with the overheads. Okay, very good. I'm only using one monitor, so this is going to be fun, but we'll get through it. Again, as I mentioned, this is where we would begin putting in those overhead costs. We start off with a bidding cash balance. This would be in the farm checking account. If you've got to maintain some kind of a minimum balance, the program allows you to do that. If you have an operating balance, it carries over from the previous year. You're able to indicate that as well. And then the interest rate that you're currently paying for the operating note. The one thing I really love about this particular program, you can do an infinite number of what if scenarios. And so when we started using this tool on our own farm for budgeting purposes this last fall, I think we plugged this number of 7.25% interest in to begin with. Our interest rates now are hovering around that 8.5%. And so if I wanted to see what that increase in interest, what effect it would have on our operation, I just simply change that one cell, hit enter, and it makes the calculations throughout to show what that one difference would make. So I think that's one of the really powerful things about it. We have an opportunity to put in up to 3 real estate loans. You put in the amount of interest, the amount of principal. Then to populate the cash flow, you would put in the percentage of that payment in which month it would be paid. So in this particular example, we make half a payment in January and then the other half annual payment in July. An opportunity to put in up to 3 machinery equipment loans, again, principal and interest, and to again indicate at what time of the year those loans would be payable. Up to 3 additional loans as well. We get to the labor section, you can put in up to 6 employees. you could either allocate their wages per each of your enterprises, or if you were just hiring someone that was going to do work in just maybe one enterprise. So we've hired someone to do some work with the cow-calf enterprise, for example. Totally, all of the wages go to cow-calf enterprise, and then we could allocate, maybe we're going to allocate half of those in the month of April when we're calving, and then maybe we're going to allocate the other half in the month of October when we are weaning and selling calves. And again, you can see we have that check column. And so if I enter something and allocate it based on a month, and the program automatically ensures that I have allocated 100% of that enterprise or that expense. If you're paying FICA or workman's comp, you can put those rates in and those will automatically be calculated into the program. Other farm expenses, certainly fuel, oil, repairs, and supplies are variable expenses, but typically we purchase those from one or two vendors, or we buy these in bulk, especially fuel. And so this allows us to put that annual expense and then to allocate that for enterprise, and then to also indicate when we would actually make those payments. We have real estate taxes, professional fees, depreciation, insurance other than crop insurance, and then plenty of capacity for other overhead type expenses. So again, one of the things that we found when we put this together is we really put together a lot more capacity than probably most people would need. So then we go from the overhead page. I mentioned the chemicals page. And again, that allows us to put in up to 4 different applications per crop. And as you can see from the examples here, you're able to put in the chemical name, the unit at which it's sold, the cost per unit, and the number of units per acre to generate then a total application cost. We find this to be really helpful, especially given the fact that there's multiple types of chemistry you could be using. There's some real variation in the cost of that chemistry. So this page alone allows you to do some tremendous what-if scenarios when you're looking at chemical costs, which have become a major cost of production in most of crop agriculture. Each crop then has an input page. This is where we put primarily those variable expenses and also the revenue side. So we would notice that the name of the commodity or the crop is pre-populated from that basic information page. We would include the number of acres, what we anticipate our yield to be, what we anticipate the market price to be. If we have any other products, this might be a grazing. If we're grazing stubble, we could include that. Then we're able to put in up to 5 different tillage operations, a couple of different seeding operations. If you've got mechanized weed control, that's included as well. Irrigation costs, fertilizer, those chemical costs are populated directly from that chemicals page, but it gives you an opportunity to also include an application cost if that's important or part of the cost. Harvest costs, we can include those. Crop insurance. If we've got a crop consultant, crop scouting, it's basically all of the expenses you might incur with a crop enterprise. Once that information is inputted, then what we find is, and we generate a crop budget. And so this is really the page that we really want to be able to get to. And you notice that on this page, there are none of those green or pale yellow boxes. All of these cells are password protected. You can't change them. And they simply are populated from the that input page. And so I'm going to move that over a little bit so you can see that a little better. We're able to determine revenue on a per unit, in this case, bushel basis per acre, total for that 560 acres. All of the costs are populated, including our overhead costs. And so then we get the total cost of production. In this particular example, it's $5.21 a bushel to produce wheat. And so that's very powerful. That helps us with our marketing. We know that we've got to look for market opportunities that are above that 521 in order to earn a profit. This is also an important number here, the total cost of production per acre. That could help us determine what crop insurance product we want and how much crop insurance we need to purchase to be able to cover our expenses should we have a loss. And then finally, all of our budgets include a break even, or what we call a sensitivity analysis. All of us understand the big components that we don't know about heading into any production year are yields and prices. So we have a table here where we vary yields, minus 10, minus 20, plus 10, 25, based off that base yield that we included up above in the input section. And then we vary prices again, minus 10, minus 25, the base price we put in, and then 10% greater and 25% greater. The real message here, take home message, is anytime based on price and yield, we have a negative or a loss, we see that in red. And so if we look at one of these sensitivity analyses and we see a whole lot of red, that would mean that under those circumstances, that's a relatively risky enterprise. In this particular case, we see a lot of black, meaning that this enterprise should be relatively profitable. It looks like we've got about 5 questions in the chat. Do we want to address some of those now or towards the end of the presentation, Doris?
Well, some of them have been getting taken care of by Jenny as we've gone along.
Great.
So it's just asking if the tool is available for people outside of Colorado, and we've got people that are really interested in this and wanting to share. So we appreciate that. And somebody commented, this is an excellent use of extension program resources. So kudos to both of you and your colleague for putting this together.
Great. Super. Very quickly, I just want to go to the crop art to the livestock enterprise input page. Again, we only have that for cow-calf. Obviously, it takes on a little different format than the crop input relating to production rates, replacement rates. The program automatically calculates total calf weaned, steers versus heifers, replacements, yearlings sold, cull cows sold, culled bulls. You're able to put in what you anticipate the revenue for all classes of cattle that will be sold, again, indicating what year or what month of the year you'll receive those. Then a very, very descriptive set of production expense pages to allow you to cover most every expense you could think about related to cow-calf production. So just like with the crop enterprises, once that page, the input page is populated, you'll get a budget page. And again, what we're going to give you is your revenue per cow, your cost per cow. And this is pretty cool. What we actually end up with is annual cow costs. And obviously that's pretty low, probably some things we need to add to this budget. But then a different form of the matrix here, this is really a break-even price based on your winning percentage, your weaning rate, and your cow cost. And so you find with this table, what do I have to receive for those calves based on that criteria in order to break even? So again, a very helpful analysis when you're looking at that budget. And then finally, the program puts it all together in a whole farm cash flow. And in addition to looking at the income, again, anywhere you see a black number, that's a number that was generated somewhere else in the program. But we have an opportunity for you to put in some of your own information. So if you're purchasing animals for resale, you can indicate that. If another source of income would be custom work, if you anticipate government payments, rents, crop insurance payments, patronage dividends, interest, if you're going to make any capital sales, a place for non-farm income. If you've got outside wages or non-farm rent or interest and dividends, you can include those. Your operating expenses, again, those are generated from other spots in the program. However, if you have some additional animals for resale, you can include those. If you anticipate any capital purchases, your loan payments then are automatically populated. If you want to take out for family living, if you anticipate what your taxes are going to be, retirement contributions. Again, we really overbuilt this with lots of capacity. The program automatically calculates cash inflows, outflows, and the net. And then finally, what's very helpful is you get this summary of your cash position and your operating loan. So we can look at this line that's beginning operating balance. Will give us an idea of what's the maximum amount of operating line we have, what's the total amount we'd have out, or the maximum amount at any one time. It allows us to make principal and interest payments at any point, and really then shows that bottom line. And so what we're really after is this far right bottom number, which is our ending cash balance. And based on the assumptions we made in this particular budget, we are projecting a net profit of $229,454. And so again, we think it's just an excellent program. I can tell you from personal experience, we've used this on our own operation and found it to be very, very helpful. We had an opportunity to change our crop mix kind of late in the game. And so before we made that decision, we were able to plug in this information and to be able to make hopefully a very good decision, a very informed decision regarding our crop mix. And I'm going to stop sharing at that point and see if we have any questions we might answer.
All right. Any questions from our audience? I think one of the things for both of you, when we start, I think for a lot of people, it gets rather daunting when we see a tool like this and see all of the numbers. And how do you help people kind of get over that kind of like, there's a little angst amongst some people when they start seeing all of this. And it's like, how would you suggest, getting started and kind of piecing this together? Should people kind of do it slowly? Should they just sit down and dedicate it a big chunk of time? What do you think helps people be most successful in using a tool like this and getting started?
Well, again, the first thing I tell people when they look at it is we overbuilt it. There is more capacity than most people would ever use. And so take that into account. Secondly, when I set this up for our own operation, it took me about 2 hours. And luckily we have good records. I had the information readily available. And then thirdly, next year, or when we wanted to look at a different crop mix, because all that data was already there, it was very easy to make those changes. And what I would anticipate is when we roll this over for 2024, most of the data is there, and it's going to change, but not drastically. And so it's really one of those things where you invest most of the time up front, and then to use it subsequent years, it's really just a matter of changing. Maybe a cost has gone up or gone down or whatever, or we're going to change acres. But the nice thing again about the tool is you can make those changes fairly quickly. And again, all of the math is done through that Excel spreadsheet. So yes, it's daunting, but it's certainly something. Invest a little time up front, and then to maintain it, you'll see that the time requirement is less and less every year.
Okay, thank you. And, a follow-up, we had somebody ask, is this, for Colorado only, or can it be used elsewhere? And also, so that's, geographically, can it be applicable? And then also we have some people on that are what I'd call more specialty crop producers and not commodity producers. So how, is this easily usable by those people that are doing specialty crops? Maybe they're running a CSA, which has a lot more variety, or maybe a farm stand, things like that. How would you see them being able to use this with that? There's, I think, 5 enterprises that they could put in on. So how would you suggest somebody like that might use your tool?
So we get that question a lot because we have certainly around the Front Range of Colorado, the more populated part of the state, a lot of vegetable production CSAs. And so most every drop down box has a drop down that you could put other on it. And so you can, designate different crops using that function. If you have more than 5 crops, you can manipulate this such that maybe you have, one file for these 5 crops, another file for the other 5. It's a matter of doing some kind of creative accounting off the overheads, but that can be done. And we've actually worked with small producers to do it. In terms of being able to use it in other states, really the thing that customizes it to Colorado are some of the terms that we use. And so if you're comfortable with, using those terms, or, maybe you write this down, corn for me is sweet corn, or, if they've got wheat, that's actually going to be, lettuce, or that's going to be the greens or something. I think you can make those modifications. I anticipate as we move forward, we're probably going to make some modifications with our small acreage colleagues to make it more user-friendly from, the titles that we use. But, the information really is such that it could be used for any type of an agricultural operation.
Certainly, certainly. All right, other questions or comments, folks? Well, certainly feel free to send me questions if you have things that come up, and I can connect those questions with Jenny and Brent. But we really appreciate your insights, your experience, your wisdom today, Jenny and Brent, and look forward to people watching the recording and going to your website and getting into some of these tools that you shared with us today. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and what Annie's in Colorado is up to. And we look forward to seeing folks on our next showcase, which is next month, focusing on succession planning.